All right, welcome everyone to another Continuing Conversations. Today we have an excellent theme. As you know, we're constantly on social media hearing what the chatter is out there in the Star Trek Adventures universe going on, and we have a helpful subject. We're going to be talking about supporting characters in Star Trek Adventures and how best to use them. Before we get started, I'm Michael Dismuke. I am the lead writer on Captain's Log and a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, and this is not a show, of course, unless we have with us Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Bodivius Entertainment. This is show 130 something of many. So excited to be here tonight again with Michael, as always, co-hosting this here show. Going strong here. We're driving toward 200, nonstop. I think with second edition quick start, second edition coming out. We got and plus new series, Star Trek series coming out. Discovery's about to end. More stuff coming. There's not going to be any shortage of things to talk about. And one of the many engines that drive STA to the success that it's been able to achieve so far is our special guest for tonight, BC Holmes. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm BC Holmes. I'm a player in several campaigns, including one that makes excessive use of supporting characters. But you may also know me as the current maintainer of the Star Trek Adventures Character Creator app, which I've been dealing with for about 3 years now.
That's right. And we had a show, if you didn't all see it, on May 24th. We had a breakdown of the show of all the latest and greatest happening in the Character Creator. Of course, since this is July, there's probably been a lot more updates. Tune in constantly because we love having BC on the show. And we especially love it when we come to talk about something that's not just strictly related to the character and ship creator. I know last time we had you on, BC, we were talking about soft science and how to use soft sciences. That was an epic episode. And today we're talking about supporting characters. So since you introduced this subject, BC, why don't you give us a theme, an idea of why this subject is so important for people who are playing the game?
Yeah, so why is it important for people playing the game? I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I know that what my passion here is that I see a lot of streams. I hear about a lot of other people's games. I'm always a little bit surprised when people don't seem to be using the supporting characters as much as we do especially on one of my campaigns. I love the supporting character concept. We've had so much fun using supporting characters in our campaigns that I'm just mystified that everyone isn't all over this, and so I thought it'd be interesting to have a conversation about what makes supporting characters exciting, what makes supporting characters memorable, what makes supporting characters an excellent tool that exists in STA, and I don't think I've seen it in any other games. I'm sure it exists in other D20, 2D20 games, but I don't think I've seen it in any other rule system I'm familiar with.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one other thing too. We're going to kind of refresh. We'll talk about an overview of the supporting character rules as presented in Star Trek Adventures, but I actually want to add a caveat also to using supporting characters too much, because I've actually seen it in playing over 60 episodes with my group, how sometimes the supporting characters might be a little too much. So we're going to talk about that. We'll save that toward the end of the conversation, though. Jim, anything you want to add?
Actually, Michael, you've really got me curious. I'm eager to hear what the perils of overusing them is. So don't lose that. Make a note of that so that we do talk about that. As far as supporting characters go, BC, I am equally mystified that people don't use that feature of the game more. I think it is baked right into Star Trek, really. I think watching all the different shows, the supporting characters are often very interesting. And when you think of characters like Chief O'Brien and Nog, who arguably could have been statted out as supporting characters from the first time you see them, and then they grow and get a life of their own, and O'Brien probably becomes a main character in his own right once he switches over to DS9. Of course, Nog continues to grow and expand. Yeah, I guess even Jake could be a supporting character too, and then the two of them grew and expanded. But I remember when I got into the playtest for the first edition of the game, the fact that the game had supporting characters as an option, that was the big discriminator for me. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And it harkened back to my group and I 20 mumble years ago when we were doing homebrew versions of Star Trek, because we played FASA, we played Last Unicorn, we played Decipher. We liked them, parts of them, for different reasons, but we were never quite satisfied with what was out there officially, right? So we kind of created our own homebrews. And I know that our most successful games, we were pretty much playing troop style, where we all had main characters, and then two of us were co-GMs. We had main characters, but we also had a lot of supporting characters, and then the players also took it upon themselves to play supporting characters when their main character wasn't involved in the show, because they wanted to be involved in the game. They wanted to play, they wanted to have fun. Sometimes they were happy to sit back and just watch other people play, but sometimes they wanted to be involved too. And it got to the point where after a couple of years, we had huge rosters of NPCs, right? And some of them didn't have many stats, maybe like one stat and maybe one phrase that really kind of made that character, right? So it was kind of a proto supporting character mechanic, right? Even though we didn't even think of it as a mechanic, we were just like, oh yeah, grab a a junior con officer off the list, grab that name and use them in the scene. Or, a couple episodes later, they were like, oh, I really enjoyed playing that character. Let me pull him back in or her back in or whatever. And so when I saw the playtest, I was like, oh man, this is awesome that Nathan baked it right into the game. And it's such a key component of Star Trek. I am likewise stunned that more people don't take advantage of it. And I'd love to get into we may not do it in this show, but I'd love to get into the psychology of gamers and why do some gamers just fixate on one character and that's all they want to play. Whereas, excuse me, my cat's showing off. And then other players are like, no, I want to play all the characters.
I think we should talk about that, Jim. I think it's totally the right place. I want to just give a couple reminders about what supporting characters are in case you're new to the game and aren't familiar with the rules. I'm going to actually truncate them from the not the captain's log, the tricorder set. The tricorder set supplement, page 113 in the chapter reporting on duty, reminds us how supporting characters differ, and this is important, differ from playing the main role. Supporting characters can do minor actions, so those come automatic. When it comes to tasks, supporting characters, an uncontrolled character, this means not controlled by a particular player, they're just supporting at this point, cannot attempt a task that has a difficulty above 0. Okay. And in combat, they don't receive a turn during combat. Instead, their minor actions or tasks could support the player character, for instance, by rolling an assist die. And I want to specify this because this is something we really had to work out in our game, is a supporting character is an uncontrolled character. So what does that mean? That means, for instance, if you have already your player character in the game and a supporting character is there, you only can play, according to Raw, one character at a time. So you're playing your main PC. That automatically makes this other character who's a supporting character can only roll assists or roll on difficulty 0 tasks. So I want to be clear on what that is. And the reason why is if all of your PC goes away, this supporting character can very well step up and become a main character for that scene. And that now they can start rolling on more difficulty tasks, or they can do stuff that is assisted by other people. So I want to be clear on that because that's something that took us a couple episodes to really work out and understand. So those are the basic rules around supporting character. All right. So with that said, BC, take it from there. Supporting characters.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So in the campaign that I'm a player in, I play the captain. We have a PC captain. But I also play the sort of, next generation style of captain. So I often remain on the ship when, we're in orbit and we want to send a team down. Not just because that's the sort of style that, next generation seems to advocate in favor of, but also we are often in a situation where there are enemy ships in orbit, et cetera, and it just doesn't make sense for the captain to leave the ship under those circumstances. So I often play a lot of supporting characters in that sort of setup. So anytime we send a team down or a team off to explore the space station or whatever it is, I'm often playing supporting characters. And initially, I think our entry into this had to do with the fact that I love being able to put names to individual characters. So when we started the campaign, we had our player characters. Surprisingly, few of them were bridge crew. So I went to the GM and I said, "Hey, I want to know who our bridge crew is." And he just gave me like names and one sentence descriptions of each member of the bridge crew. And over time, we just started like finding reasons to use those people for various things. Often, I would go off and play one of those characters as we would go into an away mission. But over time, what we've discovered is like we have this living, breathing crew of various characters that all have interesting and distinct personalities, and some exceptionally memorable characters from our campaign happen to be some of these supporting characters. And so the idea that people are running campaigns, like everyone gets to have their own preferences and gets to run the game the way that they want to run it. But like imagining a scenario where I didn't have that wonderful cast of characters as fully fleshed out as they are in our game, just as something that feels like a great loss. I was like, why?
Well, I do want to go to your point. You said you're playing a TNG style game, right? I have to say, and this was heavily discussed in our group, TOS or TAS, the animated series, did not utilize supporting characters as much as TNG, Voyager, Deep Space Nine. So I want to be clear on this because it's not unusual. If you think about the animated series or the original series, what three characters stole the limelight every single episode? Kirk, Spock, McCoy. So they were, if there was a supporting character, what's usually going to happen to them? They're going to die. Right? That's very TOS. So we talked about that difference of style game. And this was kind of a session zero continues conversation for us. It's like, what kind of game are we trying to play here? What feel are we going for? And then BC, you talked about adding in these characters. I want to tell people one more rule from first edition Raw. I think it's in second edition Raw. We'll know by the time this comes out, probably. But every time you add a supporting character, you can either add a value, add to their attribute, add to their discipline, add a focus, which to us is super important because maybe you don't have anybody with a specialty in xenobiology. Well, this is now we have a supporting character. We're bringing them in and they happen to have xenobiology, or you can add a talent to them too. So for those of you wondering why bring in supporting characters, it can fill in those gaps on certain types of missions. So that's some of the pluses to that.
And that's been a central element of our games. Like, we often have missions where like we just don't have a player character that feels like they fit the essential needs of that. So, for example, we had a rescue mission in one story. We had to send a team down to rescue people who were shipwrecked on a pre-warp society, and we had to sneak in and find the people and extricate them. But we also suspected they had injuries, and none of us were the doctor. And so, like, okay, that what makes the most sense is our doctor, who had up until that point had been an NPC. It's like, okay, we're promoting you to a supporting character. Let's stat you out. Off we go. The doctor is going on this particular mission, and as I usually do, like I get into it, and I'm like, all right, how do we make this doctor interesting, memorable, and unique? And that's the part that I just absolutely adore about supporting characters. You get to get in there and say, all right, I'm playing the same. I want to be Jeffrey Combs. I want every character that I play to have something that really redeems them or makes them exciting and a character that you want to see again. And I love that.
Totally love that. There's another thing I like using supporting characters for. I find that sometimes players aren't the best at bringing out the nuances of the other player characters, meaning player wants to talk about something obscure, but it cracks me up so many times. And all my players who are listening, this is my pet peeve, so pay attention, that in downtime, they don't ask each other questions about, hey, what's your favorite music? Hey, what's your favorite food? And what's the most horrifying experience you've ever had in your life? Now, in my game, I try to have them use downtime and I try to pitch out questions for them to ask to each other to enrich their characters. But sometimes some people fall flat on it. I'm not blaming any of you, my players, by the way. This doesn't apply to you at all. But some people fall flat on that. And so that's where I'll bring in a supporting character to create that dialogue. So I'm talking to myself, yeah, but I want to expose this part of my character to people, and the other players just aren't getting where I want to go. That's the power of the supporting character to me many times.
Yeah, and I think you hit on an interesting point, Michael, about the risk of being a game master and talking to yourself, NPC to NPC. Right? I hate doing that. Like, it drives me crazy when I'm running a game session and I find that the narrative has gone into a place where I have two NPCs talking to each other. I hate that. I always try to find a way. How do I get out of this as fast as humanly possible so that I can get the NPC talking to a player? Right. And I know that adding supporting characters, in my experience, is just it's digging into the soap opera aspect of a Star Trek game, because I feel like my best RP experiences with Star Trek has always been the interpersonal relationships and the interpersonal connections. It's junior officers talking to senior officers. It's senior officers talking to junior officers. It's peers talking to each other. And because I love to test my players and their characters in ways that have nothing to do with the plot, right? Like, because like sometimes, especially the really um, not good, the really engaged players will make an effort to create backstories and create histories of their characters, and they'll drop in little nuggets here and there. And I'll take that and I'll go, oh, I can create a supporting character that can tie into that. Or if they're playing a department head, maybe this player doesn't know Star Trek that well, but they want to be like a chief engineer, or they want to be a chief security officer or something. All right, I'll make you a lieutenant or Lieutenant JG. You're now in charge of this department on this small ship. You have a staff. You have people under your command that are looking to you for guidance and support. And so this is such a great way. I absolutely love this about Star Trek, because it fits into the milieu that we see on the screen. Is opening up an episode with a junior officer coming up to a player character saying, hey boss, I have a problem. Here's my problem. It's now your problem. I need you to help me solve it. And they have this conversation and this connection, and you're creating depth with this supporting character. This supporting character now has a name. Now they have a personality. They might have a value. They might have a thing going on. And so they're there, right? And so now the player character may go off and solve the plot of the week or whatever, but that crew is still there. That crew doesn't go away, right? It's always there, and you can always bring them back later.
Well, Jim, and I gotta say that this is so important for game masters to understand. You're gonna have players who are afraid to take risks or afraid to take extreme opinions and stances. That's what the supporting character can do. For instance, I may have a character on my crew who says, "I will never trust Romulans." We have a Romulan captain. So I need that to come out in conversation with another player, or if the player character selects them, I'm going to send that character on the mission against the Romulans, especially a Romulan who's maybe looking for asylum. And so these supporting characters, you should build them, in my opinion, in a more extreme way. Because think about it, if you're an actor, you only get one time to be on a show, you better shine, right? Jeffrey Gomes, yeah, I mean, he's on 20,000 shows, but every character, when he brings it on, they stand out. They take extreme positions, and that's what the supporting characters, because sometimes, in my opinion, players tend to play it a little safe, even though this is Star Trek and not Dungeons and Dragons. They play it a little safe, and I need those supporting characters. For instance, our captain's wife, captain has a wife in the game. I purposely made her take an opposing opinion, and it really threw him off. Wait, that's my wife. What? You don't think wives take opposing opinions? It's just, it was really good, but I needed that supporting character to push an issue, even though it was a little out of character for her in previous episodes. It was okay. I needed that Keiko moment versus O'Brien, right? So again, another power of the supporting character.
Yeah, just building on top of that, we had a dynamic where we were testing some brand new warp technology thing at one point. And so for safety reasons, we decided to test it in a shuttle first. And so we sent a crew in a shuttle. And it's like, okay, so we're going to send our science officer, but tying back into a previous episode, our science officer is a soft science person. So we need an astrophysicist to go along with them. And so we ended up with this, ensign fresh out of the academy, astrophysicist to join in for all of the hard science roles, but that allowed us the opportunity to create this interesting dynamic where the astrophysicist is looking up to the chief science officer, looking for the mentorship. But I also threw in the astrophysicist was a little bit terrified of the first officer, who's who can be a little intimidating, etc. And so I was able to play this interesting dynamic between the science officer and the first officer just by the way I played that particular supporting character. And I just thought it was a wonderful way of like creating a new sort of interrelationship between some of the characters just by doing that.
I love that. So you paint a character almost on paint a target on the supporting characters back. And so to all you timid players out there, maybe you don't want to beef between the bridge crew. Play a supporting character sometime. If you have something to say, maybe against the captain or against another character, use a supporting character as fodder for that. But you can at least get it out safely in that way, right?
Yeah, I think a good example that just sprung to mind just listening to you, those of you who want to go do your research, go watch the original series episode, the Galileo 7. It's an episode where Spock is in charge of an away team, a bunch of people on a shuttle, things go bad. But in the process of things going bad, some of the supporting characters on that shuttle with him are like supernumerary security officers or engineers or something. They have opinions and they express those opinions to Spock, and in the course of that episode that made Spock think differently about things, right? So that's illustrating the power of a supporting character. Is like you can bring in that opposing viewpoint. And Michael, I know you love doing that because you did it in the captain's log session we did, where you brought one of the captain's spouses into play and with an opposing viewpoint. And me, I don't like conflict, and you brought the conflict in, and I'm like, oh man, I got to deal with this now. But it made the episode so much richer because different focus on the problem. And I mean that's good drama, right?
It does. Or when I played Neelix as a supporting character, remember, and he went against the captain. I to your point, if you really want to see this in play, one of the best there's so many good ones. Voyager, the episode Good Shepherd, where Janeway took the 3 ensigns on a training mission, and one of those, I think his name was Mortimer or something. Mortimer was totally like, I hate being here. It's your fault. We got stuck out here. I don't want to talk to anybody. That was such a good episode. And maybe those are things another player can't say to the other captain, because you don't want to, piss off your other player captain. Like, you suck at making decisions. Okay, but maybe you could creatively get a Mortimer on there and say some things that your character may not say for risk that you have to come back next week,
Yeah, and I think just talking about supporting characters, I think it was a real wonderful addition to the game when we added supervisory characters to the mix with lower decks, right? So now not only can you play a junior officer if your senior officer is busy, but now if you're playing like a lower decks game, you can flip it. And so like maybe you're tired of playing the haggard ensign constantly doing the scout work. Now maybe you can go play the XO for a little while, or you can go play the department head for a little while and just change that perspective a little bit. So I think it's really exciting that now you can go both directions with that. And it would be very minimal effort to turn that into a civilian supporting character or a civilian supervisory character, right? So if you're playing a civilian game with either first edition or second edition or captain's log, maybe you decide to play a junior scientist on some backwoods research facility or something, and you're like, oh, I'm kind of tired of being the newbie, cleaning all the flasks and doing the grunt work. Maybe I'm going to go play the senior doctor now, and you just flip it around. And I think I just love the extra layers of stuff that you can bring to a story by using supporting characters. BC, I think I interrupted you. You're going to add something.
No, I don't think you interrupted me at all. I was interested in so we've talked about the use of supporting characters from how do you get interesting different stuff in the player dynamics. But I guess I'm also interested in the question of what makes a compelling supporting character, and two thoughts that are jumping into my mind that I haven't really fully flesh these out yet. Is so one, I have a theater background, and so like I'm a theater kid from way back, and so to some extent, like pulling stuff from my many past experiences playing Third Spear Chucker from the left is one of the things I bring into that. How do you make Third Spear Chucker from the left interesting and memorable? And then I guess the other thing is, I know that the two of you have also talked about writing as a tool that you bring into game. how do you make characters that you create in writing distinct? And then that's like giving them interesting ways of talking and particular quirks. And I remember a workshop I was in once was one of the things I took away from it was any character that's in a scene longer than 2 sentences has to want something. Like at some point they have to express a want for something. And so even as simple as figuring out what your supporting character wants is a thing that is crucial, I guess. And I think that's another thing to bring into there. I'm wondering how you guys figure that stuff out.
Yeah, how I play it, and I've never. This is how I play it. I've never instructed my players to do this, but I look at the values and kind of what you said about they have to express their wants within 2 lines. My thing is, you do an improv technique where I have to somehow work their value into a verbal line, even if it shoots them in the foot. They have to say it. And so, and I was going to add, because like when I write the modules for Star Trek Adventures, if you look at the modules I write and look at the statements of the major characters and notables that I put in there, I'd say use these, make them say it, because sometimes we've turned our majors into supporting characters. Our majors have actually, just like you took your NPCs, we've taken our NPCs and actually made them supporting characters. And so I think provocative is the key to your point, BC. Like supporting characters are not there to kiss butt, unless that can create conflict. They're there to incite an incident. If they're not inciting an incident, why do you even have them? Then that means they're the background people in Star Trek who you never see anything but the back of their head typing at the master situation display. Leave them doing that. But if you're introducing someone for play, they better blow something up, make a mistake, piss somebody off, because that's the way they're going to be remembered. That's my opinion.
So could I throw out one alternative, which is I think this is true of a lot of the characters I play, is that a lot of them have a quirk, and they're not necessarily like irritating or creating conflict, but their quirk is memorable, and and it just becomes like the defining characteristic of that particular character. So, for example, in one of the longest running supporting characters in the campaign I'm a player in, consistently raises this point that she's a Kirk truther. She thinks it's ridiculous that Kirk claims to have met Lincoln and and Mozart and
I love that.
Cochrane and the Greek god Apollo, and this is not at all possible. This is all made up. It never really happened, etc. And she drops this stuff into conversation constantly.
That creates conflict, though. That is conflict. I love it.
I love that idea, because it makes you think of the entire original series from a different angle. Imagine the whole original series is all from Kirk's point of view, from his captain's logs and stuff, right? So
it is.
It completely colors everything about the series.
Well, that came into it too. The whole fact that he claimed to have gone to other galaxies like 3 times.
Right, or the center of the universe several times.
Right. It's all
the universe.
Yeah, Kirk's the biggest, exaggerator. I love that.
I wanted to answer your question, BC, because I've got a theater background too, and I think the two key things I remember being taught to do when playing the third spear chucker from the left, or the bit part or whatever. Like, actually, I enjoy playing those character roles because they're the most memorable. Because I always try to put some sort of weird quirk or funny bit, or the character has some sort of token or some sort of thing that is them, right? So like, even if you don't remember any of the lines or something, you remember, oh, that was the guy that was flipping the coin throughout the entire show or something in the background. Just like one little thing that's memorable. So that was one thing. And then the other thing I like to do with when either playing a supporting character or on stage, or in an RPG or something, I remember Ben Elton mentioned this when he was in Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing. Ben Elton played Verges to Michael Keaton's Dogberry, right? The characters. And Ben Elton said, I don't really have a lot to do in the movie because I'm Verges, and I'm this bit player supporting Dogberry. But his important thing was like, every chance I have, I am right next to the talent. So like every time Michael Keaton's on screen, I'm right there, right next to him. So you can't forget me. Like I'm literally right there. So he may not have any lines, he may not have anything to do, but he and Kenneth Branagh found a way to make sure every time you see Dogberry, there's Verges sitting right there, so you always see him. And just the visibility of him is enough sometimes to plant it into the audience's head that this character is a living, breathing thing, right, in the show. And I think you see that actually in Star Trek too. I think of Lieutenant J on Next Generation, right? It was this actress who was in like 90% of the TNG episodes, never had a line, but she was always there, like push, like you were saying, Michael, pushing the buttons at the consoles, but you saw her face. You didn't see the back of her head that often. You saw her face, and she was walking through the hall sometimes, and you see her. But it was like a touchstone. Like it was like a
she's part of the set.
Yeah,
yeah.
But it was like it gave the audience some grounding, right? And in fact, even if you watch Next Gen, especially in the early seasons, a couple of the security officers were the same actors coming back time and time again. And it's like, a couple of them didn't even have names. You're like, oh, that's the same security officer that was helping Worf that other episode or whatever. And it's like, that's the kind of thing that players like to latch onto in games. And that's something that I love as a game master, is to pull those characters back in and sometimes kill them or maim them or hurt them and make the players go like, oh man, we love that character and you've killed him, what have you done? Because that just adds emotion and pathos and stuff, and I just love doing that kind of stuff, and that's the power of supporting characters.
That is, and two there's a couple of things, and this will actually start moving toward my caveat, is not having too many supporting characters. So I call it kind of Larry, Moe, and Curly. So if you watch the shows, you're going to have to find a time where you prove me wrong on this. But usually you were never going to see 3 supporting characters come in at a time. I think it's something about the human mind and remembering as actors. So when you're looking at the supporting characters, you got one strong one, you may have 2 come in, but very rarely in a Star Trek show will you see more than 3 supporting characters who are playing an active role. Try to outsmart me on that. Send me some episodes. But overall, when I'm noticing, I notice there's kind of limit of 3. And because I think, which again moves to my caveat, I won't go straight into it yet, it dilutes who the stars of the show are. And you have to be super careful with the timing on that, because once you start doing that, I'll feel like I'm watching first season of Discovery, which means there's all these characters, I don't know who they are. Right. And so you got to be super careful with the use of supporting characters in that. So depending on how big your group is, just consider that. Are they overtaking the show or not?
That's
how do y'all feel about that?
I was immediately, I was trying to think my way through DS9 and like what episodes had multiple supporting characters in it. And I think there's a fine line between what's a supporting character and what's a minor, notable, major NPC, right?
I'll tell you the difference. Just so you know, to define it, they either have a speaking role or they don't.
Okay.
So you could have 17 Jim Hadar there, but out of them, only 3 max are going to speak. You're going to have you're going to have one Vaunter, you're going to have a Vorta, and you're going to have one vocal Jim Hadar. So it's about the speaking role, which would make them, in my mind, a supporting character.
Okay, got it. Yeah, because I was thinking, there were plenty of DS9 episodes. I mean, DS9, I think, is still the one Star Trek series that has the most robust supporting cast, right? I mean, just all the different supporting characters that are supporting. I'm losing my words. I think DS9 had the most deep bench of minor characters that they kept bringing back. You got Damar and Kai Wynn and Shakar, Eden, and all these different characters, Brunt. But I think you're right in that they didn't bring them all into the same episode so that you lose the focus on who the main characters are, right? I think it was usually Wynn and Dukat, or Dukat and Damar, and then you throw in Wayoon from time to time. But not until later in the series did they start really using them a lot more. But yeah, I agree with you, and I appreciate you bringing it up that too many supporting characters can dilute the spotlight, as it were, right?
Let me just jump in before BC jump in, because I know you want to say that, but I want to say, like, some people may say, well, I'm going to send him the episode where if this was the 5 Ferengis. No, because what they did is they removed all the main characters and the 5 Ferengis became the main spotlight for that episode. So I just want to be clear on what I mean by when you have a show, who the supporting characters. In that Ferengi episode, they were the stars.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I thought about while you were talking about that, your definition of the supporting characters versus the background characters is, and Hollywood has this notion of the five or less role, which is like a character who has no more than five lines, and they get to speak, but they aren't important enough to really care about. And they probably, because they speak, they get like an acting credit at the end of the episode. But they're never fleshed out. They never do anything more. And I think that that's probably like the sort of idea I would have in my head about, who's just an NPC. Maybe they have five or fewer lines, but supporting characters get to do a whole lot more.
Yeah, well, in Hollywood, the minute you say a line, you get a different pay rate. So, which is why, like some DS9s, you'll see like a Dabo girl, and Quark will be having a full conversation with them, and all she'll do is giggle, because if she actually responds, even with a thank you, when she gets that Latinum, they have to pay her a whole different rate. So, I think that's mentally affected us about how we tell stories, even around the RPGs table. We've somehow embodied that energy from Hollywood in how we construct stories.
Yeah, well, maybe that's something we need to help game masters break and players break, is that when you're running Star Trek Adventures or you're playing Star Trek Adventures, you don't have to worry about a budget. You don't have to pay residuals to all these supported characters, right? It's okay, they can talk. Let them talk.
Yeah, but I'll tell you right now, though, again, when I get into my big why you may want to avoid supporting characters in some games, you'll see why psychologically I still think having too many can actually hurt your game.
Another example of a role, I guess, that sometimes non-central characters can sometimes play. I'm thinking about the Bill Paxton character in Aliens, and Adam Savage made this comment about him a while back, where he says that character from Aliens gets to say the things that the audience is kind of thinking at that time. Like, he gets to say, "This is it. We're all gonna die. It's game over, man. Game over." Whereas like the heroes have to be heroic, like they have to make the hard choices, they have to like go in and try to fight, etc. But Bill Paxton gets to be afraid and terrified and and say all the stuff that makes it more scary, etc.
I love that you brought that up, BC, because I know in our game we're battling whether the Prime Directive is legit or not. But I'm telling you right now, my opinion, again, my players are listening to this, we'll talk about it offline, but they're pretty faithful adherents to the Prime Directive initially, like almost religiously scary. So, and so I bring in the supporting characters to ask the tough questions. One of them being this: wait a second, we're out here to explore the universe. Why are we afraid to explore new ideas? And they would never say that to each other. But so I have to bring in the supporting character to drop that on their lap. Like, what are you so afraid of? What if the Prime Directive is not the best thing out there? What are you so afraid of? Is this religion to you? Like, and I love bringing in the support, and they picked up on it, and they brought in supporting characters to argue the point too. Things, again, that they may not want to beef about with the captain directly.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're sort of dancing around is the use of supporting characters as a tool for the GM to introduce something. But I guess a lot of my experience of using supporting characters is as a player. So when I'm not playing my main character, I'm playing a supporting character, and I get to do different things with that. And I think a lot of your examples are I am a GM and I'm using a supporting character because I want to draw this out of the player.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm a player and I'm playing a supporting character because I want to mix this up, or I want to change the dynamic of this particular thing.
Yeah, and that's what I want to encourage people to do, BC. My thing is, people are so risk averse to me. In an RPG game, I don't understand people who are risk averse. And so I do, you're right. As a GM, I kind of try to exemplify it with my use of NPCs, because when a GM's controlling them, it's an NPC, not a supporting character. But I do have players who picked up on it, and they're like, oh, I'm going to do a supporting character and use them for this. What my character can't say because it's out of their personality. So yes, everyone, if you're listening to this episode, just clip this one point out: is use supporting characters to push the limits.
And absolutely valid. I think I would also encourage players who are more risk adverse, right, use supporting characters to stay involved in the game if your character is not actively involved in the current scene, right? Like if you are the chief medical officer and you are happy playing the chief medical officer, but the rest of the group is now embroiled in a desperate phaser fight on the planet, don't just sit there and watch them. I mean, if you want to just sit there and watch them, yeah, totally, do that, because sometimes there's a lot of joy in just watching your friends flip out and are they going to make it? But if you're the type of player that wants to be involved in every scene, but it doesn't make sense for your character to be involved in every scene, then don't hesitate. Grab a supporting character and just jump in. You can absolutely do the stuff that Michael and BC are talking about, where you want to play the character to add another nuance to an ongoing conversation. But just for practical purposes, just playing the game and wanting to be involved, the tools are there for you. So definitely jump in there. There's a lot of different ways you can actively be involved, because I'm sure we've all had stories of players who were not engaged in the game if they're not directly involved in the scene, right? Their main character is not directly involved in the scene, to where they're on their phone or they're distracted or they're flipping through the book or they're whatever. And you don't have to do that. Like being a player, that's a choice, right? You're either choosing to be disruptive or passive aggressive, like whatever, or you can grab a supporting character and jump in, right? Like, I mean, every ship in Starfleet or any other space faring civilization in Star Trek, there's usually hundreds of people on that ship, right? And every supporting character is hundreds of potential stories waiting to be added to the mix. So jump in, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, BC.
I think that central to the point you were just making is this idea that sometimes there are scenes that don't need the skills that your primary character has lit it up on. An example in my mind immediately is like, we have a wide variety of characters, but none of us are security officers, for example, and none of us have loaded up on the pew pew skills. And so anytime we need a scene in which, we need to go in and we need to, break into the whatever or fight the whomever, we have a handful of recurring supporting characters who are like part of the security details, and they go in and they do the fighting scenes, etc. Often led by some of our primary characters. But that's useful from a resource point of view. Like it makes sense to have characters that have those skills at their disposal. But it also makes sense from a narrative point of view, because TV shows have this huge pressure to constantly use the actors that they're paying on a regular basis for everything, and so you get really weird situations where, why is it that it's always Jim, Spock, and McCoy that go down on all of the away missions? Did they need a doctor on this away mission? Did they need a science officer on this away mission? Sometimes that just seems to be a little bending of credulity or something.
Yeah, but we buy it. We buy it because it's TV. So and this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox for a little bit for players, not against players, but I like conflict, and I've seen it happen where players will bring in supporting characters and miraculously they all agree with what everyone else is doing. I think that defies role playing. In fact, I think you're a good player, storyteller, when you can play two characters at the same time and have them come in with opposing opinions. But get this, what if the supporting character is right? Can you actually play hard enough that you can actually be wrong, that your main character can actually be wrong? That's when you prove to me that you're a player. Is when you can actually say, I'm going to act that this supporting character is actually right on this and really create some drama. And my character may have to eat some humble pie. We see it happen in the shows all the time. They learn lessons and we're like, we love these characters because they're so open-minded and able to learn. And then as a player, you can't do that. So yeah, there's a bunch of people. I'm on my soapbox. You can play the game. Good for you. You know the rules. You know the raw rules of Star Trek Adventures. Can you act? Can you role play? And can you play two characters with differing opinions and let your main character be wrong? Now you're impressing me as a GM. Now I'm having fun because those are the stories I want to go back and read. So again, for supporting characters, I know we're talking BC and Jim about, you can bring in extra focuses or talents you don't have and round out your team. But I'm all about the narrative and the storytelling. I want to really see how this pushes the conflict and there's a lesson learned at the end for the main characters, be they right or be they wrong.
Yeah, the thing that jumps into my mind when you say that is the idea that all the characters, including the villains, are the heroes of their own particular story, and I certainly have had. I'm calling to mind times when I've been writing characters who've been taking a position that is radically different than my own position, but the 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 thing that makes them seem authentic is like trying to see how they see a particular problem, even if I don't agree with what they're saying. Can I give them dialogue that that sounds like it's legitimate and almost believable, etc., even if they're saying the most awful thing that you could possibly imagine. So I think that those tools from writing, I think, can lend themselves well to supporting characters in those cases. Can I imagine the headspace that this character who thinks very differently than other characters, or maybe my primary character, can I imagine what's going on in their head so they can espouse this differing point of view? And I think that's a really interesting narrative exercise.
Yeah, I think with the right group that would work really, really well. I think other groups it may not work quite so well. I think that's where you need to have a certain amount of uh, good social contract among your players in your group. I think I mean, in my history, some players would latch onto that and do very well, and some players would be very abrasive or offended or really, really struggle with that. It would take them out of the game, right? And I don't think I'd want to take anybody out of the game, right? But like conflict, good, healthy, absolutely. But like constantly bashing in their face about opposing viewpoints or something, I think there's a fine line. You just need to find that fine line with your group and make it work.
Yeah, it shouldn't be every episode. It can be exhaustive. I agree with that. Like, I admit I've terrorized, my crew with maybe like 4 or 5 episodes back to back, a lot of pathos. But then there's times where after that, we're like, okay, you know what? We need 3 like classic episodes that are flu and very clear cut. But it's definitely session 0 conversation before you before you get in, which I did, like say, for instance, my last time I dragged someone through the mud with their permission, they said, these are where I want to take the character. We're going to push it so that the other players are like, what the heck is going on? But we have an out for you. But it was all scripted ahead of time privately to increase the intensity. And I think my group has now kind of figured that out, that if things are going really weird, this is a plot between player and GM. And that kind of has to be an agreement conversation, and how you use supporting characters to do that. If you're bringing in a character, even killing a supporting character is a big deal. So it's usually discussed. It's not something I just do. All right. So can I now finally talk about when not to do support? So it's the session 0 again. I noticed in our game, and this is something that we're working through even as we speak, I noticed that people were so enjoying our 80 plus supporting characters on our ship. Mind you, we have 150 crew members, but we've mapped out 80 of them. Okay, 80 plus. And detail, they're either minor, notable, or major PCs. And some of them have such hilarious, great personalities, they constantly kept being called up. In fact, they were called up so much in the game that it started, in my opinion, to dilute the main characters and who the stars of the show were. And it became hard for me as a GM to write stories that challenged the main characters because I didn't know what they were going to bring in to throw it off. And so I had to have a session 0 continues with my group and say, you know what? Are we playing TOS here? Are we playing TNG? Are we playing Discovery? And I say Discovery because, of course, Michael Burnham solves everything in the universe and has no problems. And boy, she's the smartest person in the universe. And there's these little side characters that sometimes show up. So that's what I mean by Michael Burnham. So what are we playing here so that I can write accordingly? That was important for me as a GM to do that. And so I think we've landed on, we have the main characters. We're primarily going to focus on them, and we're really going to use those raw supporting character rules because as much as possible, I'm going to try to have them in the scenes together for at least what we're calling our final season. I really want to move it where they know who their characters are. And I don't want to focus on the Horda from Decade. I don't want to focus on the cool Exocomp who's part of our crew. Yeah, they're fun. But when people are sitting down at their TVs watching our show, who do we want them to leave thinking about? And so we had to have that conversation. So that's where my caveat is on supporting characters. Negotiate who the stars of your show are early on and what your limit to bringing in the supporting characters is going to be for driving that narrative. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, my first thought, being a writer and a game master, my first thought is if the players are enjoying that many supporting characters that often, that's a cue to me to start painting a target on their back, and start turning some of them into styrofoam polyhedrons, or crystals inside a uniform, or stepping on an explosive flower.
But I love them. But I love them too. That's the problem.
No, but we're writers, Michael. You know this. We got to kill our darlings. Kill the darlings, because it's going to create great new drama and emotion in the main characters who are the focal points of the series, right?
You don't understand. 3 of the main characters, their wives are the supporting characters. They keep coming back. Do you realize if I kill their wives, how much trouble I'm going to be in?
The drama. Juicy, lovely, human, real life drama. People die all the time. I hate to say it, but I mean oh man, it's such a great game master writing tactic. Is you get people in love with certain characters, especially the good supporting characters, and then you make them go away. I mean, maybe they transfer off the ship, maybe they go someplace else, or
maybe I'll make a rule that if you use them a certain amount of times in a season, that they're more liable to die,
or they get lost in a temporal rift.
Yeah, I don't want to say that. Oh,
maybe they go come back someday or something. But yeah, I think if I was starting to become burdened by a very large cast of characters that was starting to overshadow the main characters, I'd start doing some strategic weeding. But that's just me.
I was just reminded of a story that we had back when we were playing Pass the Track, and so I was listening to what you were saying and thinking, wow, harsh, oh my gosh. But then I was thinking, okay, so what else could you put in that sort of category? And so this reminded me of this one story item. So the premise here is, this is long before the Next Generation came out, or in particular Deep Space Nine. We revisited the Mirror Mirror episode, except it's not the player characters who change. It's suddenly like 4 NPCs are suddenly behaving differently, and the characters don't really know why. And it turns out, like, they're from the Mirror universe, etc. Be interesting to try to do that with the supporting characters as well.
Oh, that's a good idea. 3 Mirror wives. Ouch. Yeah, I think that's it. So I just warned, because I personally, you were talking about, before, the Kirk McCoy spy, like, how is it that the Doctor is on every single one of these missions? I kind of like that. I don't know why I like that, but maybe it's because I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad, and it modeled so many TV shows we watched in the 60s and 70s, where you always had the same Mission Impossible group, or, Lost in Space group solving all these problems. And so I think that's a flavor and a type of show that some people actually want out of their gaming. They want to be the star of every show. So, but some may not feel that way in nowadays game, day and age. And I think that, to me, again, my thing is, caveat is, discuss it ahead of time, agree with how many supporting characters will take a lead role. And I like using the supporting characters as raw, saying they can only assist, they only could do difficulty 0 tasks. That's cool with me all day. It's when all of a sudden the supporting character is just leading the show. That's where it's like, or we've had it where only supporting characters were in the scene and there were no main characters in it, and they had the most to do, the supporting characters. They were actually helping take back the ship. I'm like, that shouldn't happen every episode. To me, that's my style of Star Trek play,
Yeah, I guess the question that jumps into my head when you say that is, to what extent are people choosing not to play supporting characters because they want to be the star of the show? Like, that could be one motivation. I think another another motivation could be, I said earlier I have a theater background, and so I am practiced at jumping into and inhabiting a character very quickly, and not necessarily everyone has that practice. And so I've definitely experienced players who say, I'm figuring out the primary character. I don't want to confuse myself by like swapping characters at times. That's just going to lead to muddiness and lack of clarity, etc. So that could be a thing as well. But there's a part of me that looks at that second thing and think, oh, but you're missing out. Like I get, you want to grow your skills here, but until you do that, you're missing out on something. And
I think that's what it is, motivation. I have one player who hates playing any other character as a lead role. It's just not right away. You see the energy drop. Whereas I have other people who are like you and me. Give me anybody, I'm going to have a ball. I want to be Jeff Combs. It's like, give me anything, and I'm going to find one idiosyncrasy quirk and just play that to hilarity if possible. But again, session zero talk, right? Really knowing your player group. Cool. All right. Did we exhaust it? Do you see anything else on supporting characters?
Yeah, well, I guess the Jeffrey Combs, I thought it was Coombs, but maybe it's Combs.
You might be right.
The Jeffrey C experience. Like, I remember him talking about like playing Wei-Un the first time, and he was saying like when he got the script, like this was supposed to be a one and done character. I think he even dies at the end of the first appearance as Wei-Un. But obviously, like there was something about the way he did that character that made people say, "We want to see this character again." And I guess like that's the sort of experience I am always trying to pull out of the supporting characters. What makes them memorable? What makes them fun to play alongside of? What makes them interesting? What makes them an interesting part of a particular game? And do you want to see them back again? And those are the things I'm always looking to imbue a character with.
Have you ever had a supporting character graduate to being your main character because of that?
It hasn't happened yet, but there are some characters that have recurred so many times that they're almost main characters now.
That's cool. I think that would be a real win if you pulled an O'Brien with any of the characters. And again, for people who are listening to this, it's what you want out of the game, right? For my group, all of us are writers, and so we're acting and we're really trying to create the biggest drama and conflict. And we have agreements on how bad things are going to get before they look better. We're really planning these things out as much to keep it surprising. I want to keep them surprising and suspense. But the supporting characters, there should be some agreement about how you're using them in your game for the purpose of, in my opinion, increasing the drama. If you're really trying to create a memorable story, is increasing that drama. And I can say back in my Marvel days, I made mistakes as a young GM where I was killing off their characters and supporting characters and family members. And it did not go well with some people. Like some people were like really stressed out coming. They're like, I'm having more stress in the game than in real life, and I had to learn my lessons back then when I was a new GM. So the use of supporting characters to me is a big plus. Don't get me wrong, even though I had a caveat in here. It's like, yes, I'm all into using supporting characters. My caveat is discuss in session zero how much you want to bring them in to take spotlight away from your main stars. All right. Any final words, BC and Jim?
I guess the one area that we didn't really talk about is the fact that much the same way that your characters can progress, you can also spend those progressions on your supporting characters so that they become fuller and richer characters over time.
Yeah, I did mention that a little bit in review. Remember, I said that every time you introduce the supporting character, you can either give them a value up to 4, increase attributes, one single attribute one time, one single discipline one time. You can give them a focus up to 3 times, and then finally talents, you can give them up to 4 talents. So that is kind of cool that every time you bring in a supporting character each episode, you can round them out a little bit more.
Very cool. I think that point is worth emphasizing. because I mean, even now with the announcement of second edition coming out, there was some discussion online from certain people saying, "Oh, or, did they change the advancement system? Are there levels? Are there ways? Are there more carrots for me to earn as a player for my character?" Right? It's like, well, I mean, it's not that different, right? I mean, I think gently reminding players that they don't have to spend their advancements or their improvements on their own character. Like BC was saying, you can, you know, invest in your crew, invest in your supporting characters, invest in your ship, right? You can enhance and improve your ship. You don't have to be the engineer to do it either. You could be, the chief or the main pilot, right? But maybe you spend a milestone on enhancing your ship somehow. You can play with those rules. And I think I remember there was one game, one campaign I played where the whole group took it upon themselves. Well, like whatever advancement system we created, I don't even remember. It was a homebrew, but instead of spending the improvement points on their characters, they just dumped it all into the ship, right? And not to make it more shooty, more pew pew. I think they wanted to do more. They wanted more science labs. They wanted better sensors. They wanted better engines so they could do more stuff. And I'm like, as a game master, I'm like, wow, this is kind of crazy. You're not improving your characters because like this is the same group I played D&D with, and they were all about the XP and the magic items and stuff in D&D. But when they came to Star Trek, they're like, no, I want to make that supporting character better. I want to make our ship better, and they invested not just like mechanical stuff, but they were also intentional about spending role playing time in sessions to say, oh, my character's got a little bit of downtime. She is in the, secondary cargo bay doing some building enhancements to help improve the warp efficiency or something, and we carried that over several sessions, several episodes, to where it made sense to give them the bonus to the ship stats, right? Because they were investing the time and effort into it, and I think you can totally do that. So like, if you're a player who's willing to improvement, but you want to improve the community, you want to improve the crew or the ship, go for it, because you got the tools are there, right? I mean, the tools are in the game, they're built in the game, rules is written, Michael says raw, as you do, and take advantage of it. It's just another way that you can do cool stuff with the game that's not, for lack of a better term, self-centered. And not to say that anybody's selfish or self-centered or whatever, but like, think, especially for Star Trek, right? Think outside yourself and think outside your character, and think about the larger crew and ship that you have available to you, and know that you can improve them in addition to improving yourself for more better story.
Exactly. So we're not only just about telling the story of your character, but the overall story and supporting characters are part of that. All right, gratitude time. I said, this brought back a lot of good memories. So my gratitude is going to go to my crew, the crew of the USS Pioneer, who brought on such amazing characters as Dr. Dreg, the Horda, or a dolphin, bottlenose dolphin, who's one of our main science officers, Athena Hagen, Kalani, these are all the wives. Badvin, the Romulan, a wife of one of our crew members. So thank you for bringing these characters that have brought our story to life, and makes it, one last point about supporting crew, is that when things get bad and the ship is getting blown up, the characters are caring less about themselves and they're thinking a lot about how they save their friends and family. So that really shows that they've gotten into the game and the supporting characters have become meaningful. So thank you to my players. BC?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a bit of a look into the past gratitude and say, when I first moved to Toronto, there was an RPG store, my local friendly RPG store called the World House. It sadly doesn't exist anymore, but the World House got me into so many interesting and different RPGs that I still have to look back at it and commend it, what it gave to me, and how much enjoyment I got out of that particular store.
Beautiful. All right, Jim, take us home. And thank you again, BC, for coming on. I forgot to thank you. So thank you for visiting and bringing up this amazing subject.
Yeah, thank you, BC. Great topic for conversation. I want to thank everybody who's ever played a supporting character on Star Trek or other TV shows that we draw inspiration from. I want to thank all the players in my previous campaigns, the Eagle crew, the Athena crew, Pioneer, Ranger, so on and so forth. There's so many over the years, but thanks for being great players, and also being willing to play supporting characters and to play those different angles and different perspectives to deepen the tapestry of the games we were creating. So thanks for that. And again, thanks BC for being here and for all you do for the game, but also for this great topic. I think it's super cool. And also thank you to Nathan Dowdell for creating the game system and for being intentional about building supporting characters into this game, like as a key core component of the rule set, right? Like this is a very important and useful tool in your toolbox for this game. So please think, I mean, you don't have to use it, obviously, or tweak it, bend it, spend it however you want to, but it's an awesome tool that really helps bring in the Star Trek feel to this game, unlike other RPG systems out there. I think it's really especially for all the other official Star Trek RPGs that have come along over the decades, I don't think any of them had a supporting character kind of element baked in right to them. So use the tool and have fun with it, and then tell us how it goes.
Wonderful. All right, all, till next time, the conversation continues. IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe, be well. We'll talk to you all next time.